This video will walk you through the key stitches used to create the Lion in Love. The border is stitched in a mix of split stitch and some straight stitch. You'll see that along all the straight sections, I split the stitches as I go. However, on the corners, I just do a simple running stitch. You'll find you get into a rhythm with how many stitches to use on each of the sections. For example, on the longest edges, I typically use 4 stitches, whereas in the very short sections in the centre of the meander, I just use 1 stitch. In the example of the Lion in Love photo at the start of the instruction guide, you will see that I've stitched the leaves using a straight stitch. They are stitched in the way shown here in this video. However, this is not the only way you could stitch the leaves. For example, you could use a satin stitch, as shown in the second leaf here. Both have a nice effect on a whole, and therefore it is down to personal preference which way you would rather stitch it. The wreath is stitched using chain stitch. This is one of the more complicated sections, as involves chain stitching these leaves. You'll see that I do the central line of the wreath first, before going back and using 3 chain stitches to create each leaf. As you do this, not all the leaves will come out looking the same, but do not worry about this. It's all about creating that volume. You take a similar approach when stitching the crown of the lady. By doing the central circle first in a very tight small chain stitch, you can then go back to create the leaves. On the leaves, see how I secure each chain stitch in place here. So each leaf is just made up of 1 chain stitch. It may take a few attempts on each one to get this looking the way you'd like it, but you'll learn a new way to stitch, and this is a great way people use for stitching flowers. The rest of the figure is stitched using split stitch. This is a very straightforward stitch and you can just work to fill the area. You can see here as I fill an area of the skirt, the main focus is on leaving no gaps. With the exception of the lion's face, the lion is stitched entirely in satin stitch. You'll find this very satisfying to do, as it creates a really lovely, smooth effect. You get the real shine of the thread when using it in this way. It's quite straightforward, just filling in the sections of colour, as you can see I'm doing here. As you get to the edge, you'll find you may catch the odd thread from the yellow in this border. Don't worry about this. You'll never be able to notice this in the full design, and if anything, it all adds more character to the stitches. And do remember, throughout this, you do not need to stitch the lion in love this way. You can use your own creativity, and each kit is provided with lots of extra thread if you do decide you'd like to try something different.